My son-in-law laughed out loud inside that courtroom. "Look at him," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "So broke he couldn't even hire a lawyer." I was 68 years old, sitting alone at the defense table. No attorney, no allies, no voice. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I simply waited. Then, exactly 5 minutes later, the courtroom doors swung open. A man in a flawless suit stepped inside, silver hair, icy eyes, a presence that demanded silence. The kind of lawyer powerful people fear. The entire room froze. And in that moment, my son-in-law realized he'd made the worst mistake of his life. "Thank you for being here with me today. Before we go any further, let me know where you're watching from by dropping your city or country in the comments. I truly read them all. And just a quick note before we continue, some details in this story have been dramatized to enhance its educational and storytelling value. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely coincidental, but the message you're about to hear is absolutely real. I sat alone at the defense table, my hands folded so tightly my knuckles had turned white. 68 years old, and this was what my life had come to. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper, the scent of endings. My gray suit, the same one I'd worn to my wife's funeral 5 years earlier, hung loose on my shoulders. Across the aisle, my son-in-law sat like a king. Daniel Reeves, 38, wrapped in a $4,000 designer suit. Dark hair slicked back, a luxury watch flashing on his wrist. His smile was sharp, white, and cruel. "Look at him," Daniel said loudly enough for me to hear. "Where's your lawyer, old man? You can't afford one, can you?" I didn't look up. My eyes stayed fixed on the empty chair beside me. The man sitting next to Daniel was his attorney, Harold Whitman, 52. They called him the Shark of Michigan Avenue. Navy suit, polished shoes, leather briefcase resting at his feet. He leaned in and whispered something to Daniel. They both laughed, and seated right there beside Daniel was my daughter, Emily, 34, wearing a simple black dress. She sat perfectly still and wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were locked on the judge's empty bench. I remembered her at 7 years old, pigtails bouncing as she ran beside a pink bicycle. "I've got you, sweetheart," I'd said. "I'll always catch you." That memory faded like smoke. Now she was 34, silent, sitting next to the man, tearing my life apart. "All rise," the bailiff's voice echoed, the Honorable Judge Eleanor Brooks presiding. I stood slowly as Judge Brooks entered, her black robe flowing. 58, steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun, 25 years on the bench. She struck the gavel once. "Be seated. Case number 24, CV 0091, Harris versus Harris Reeves." Her eyes settled on me. "Mr. Harris, I see you are alone. Are you expecting counsel?" I stood. My voice came out hoarse. "Yes, Your Honor. She should be here." "He's stalling, Your Honor," Daniel cut in. "He doesn't have anyone. He's broke." Heat rushed to my face. Judge Brooks snapped her gaze toward him. "Mr. Reeves, you will address the court only when spoken to." Daniel raised his hands. "My apologies. My father-in-law has wasted enough time." The way he said father-in-law made my skin crawl. Judge Brooks looked back at me. "Mr. Harris, court time is valuable. If you don't have representation—" "I do," I said quickly. "She's coming. She called last night." Daniel snorted. "Who? Your imaginary friend?" The night before, at 11 sharp, my phone had rung. The voice on the other end was rough, familiar. "Thomas Harris. It's Richard. Richard Bennett. I got your message. I'm coming. Hold on." I'd cried with the phone pressed to my ear. "I don't know if you'll make it in time." "I will," he said. "Just hold on." 30 years since we'd last spoken, but that call was the only hope I had left. Judge Brooks sighed and picked up her gavel. "Mr. Harris, I sympathize, but we cannot delay indefinitely. I'm going to have to—" "Please, Your Honor," I said, my voice breaking. "Just 2 more minutes." Daniel leaned back, grinning. "This is pathetic." Harold Whitman began closing his briefcase. Emily stared down at her hands. Judge Brooks raised the gavel. "Mr. Harris, I'm sorry. We will proceed with—" The doors burst open. The sound hit first, not the doors, but the footsteps. Click, click, click. Slow, steady, deliberate, like a metronome counting down to something unavoidable. I turned. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights. Tall, broad-shouldered, a white suit that caught the light like armor. Behind him, 3 younger figures followed, sharp and synchronized, moving like a formation. Click, click, click. The courtroom went dead silent. Harold Whitman's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. His face drained of color. Daniel squinted. "Who is that?" The man walked forward. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Silver hair brushed back, blue eyes sharp enough to cut glass, and a presence that filled the room like thunder. My chest tightened. He had actually come. He reached our table, set down a leather briefcase, soft, expensive, the kind that whispered money, and placed a cream-colored business card on the clerk's desk. Then he turned to Judge Brooks. "Your Honor," he said calmly, his voice controlled but heavy with authority. "Richard Bennett, Senior Managing Partner at Bennett & Cole Associates, Washington, D.C. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant, Mr. Thomas Harris." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs. A reporter scrambling for her phone. Judge Brooks slammed the gavel. "Order." I barely heard it. Richard Bennett. Richard. I hadn't seen him in 30 years, not since the war had pulled our lives apart. And now he was standing beside me, here to defend me. Harold Whitman rose, his face still pale. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Counsel cannot simply appear in the middle of—" "Mr. Whitman," Judge Brooks cut in sharply, "Mr. Bennett has filed his appearance. Unless you have a valid objection, you may sit down." Whitman sat. Daniel was leaning forward now, staring at Richard. His brow tightened, his mouth parting slightly. "Wait," he whispered. "Is that—" But Richard didn't look at him. He turned slowly, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked directly at Daniel Reeves, his son, and Daniel, once arrogant and smug, went completely still. Richard didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply held Daniel's gaze long enough for him to understand one thing clearly. "I know what you did." Then Richard turned back toward the bench. "Your Honor, if I may," Richard said calmly, "I'd like to begin by addressing the fraudulent power of attorney that has been submitted as evidence." Judge Brooks nodded. "You may proceed, Mr. Bennett." One of the younger men, late 20s, sharp suit, nervous energy, stepped forward and handed Richard a thick folder. Richard opened it and removed a document. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the so-called power of attorney bearing Mr. Harris's signature. It has been reviewed by 3 independent forensic handwriting experts. All 3 have concluded the signature is forged." He placed the document on the table before Judge Brooks. "Your Honor, my client has been systematically defrauded. His accounts were frozen, his assets were stolen, and his daughter was manipulated and isolated by the man sitting across from me." Daniel shot to his feet. "That's not—" "Mr. Reeves, sit down," Judge Brooks snapped. Daniel dropped back into his chair. Richard didn't even glance at him. "Your Honor," Richard continued, "I intend to prove not only that Daniel Reeves committed fraud and elder financial abuse, but that he did so with premeditation, coercion, and malice." He paused. "And I will do so using his own words." The room went dead silent. I looked at Daniel. His face shifted from red to white to a sickly gray. Then I looked at Richard, my old friend, my defender, the man who had flown in from Washington to stand beside me. He glanced once more at Daniel, and this time he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. The word slipped from Daniel's lips like a stone. "Dad." His face drained completely. Every trace of arrogance vanished. He looked like a man who had just watched a ghost step out of his worst nightmare. The courtroom erupted. Gasps overlapped. A reporter in the back row lunged for her phone. Harold Whitman's pen clattered to the table again, and this time he didn't bother picking it up. Judge Brooks slammed the gavel. "Order, order in this court." She struck it twice more. The noise faded, but the tension did not. Every eye in the room locked onto Richard Bennett. He didn't flinch. He turned back to the bench, calm as winter air. "Yes, Your Honor," he said evenly. "Daniel Reeves is my son. That is precisely why I know exactly what he is capable of." My chest tightened. My son-in-law. His son. Daniel jumped up again. "You can't. This is a conflict." "Sit down, Mr. Reeves," Judge Brooks said sharply. "Your attorney may raise objections. You may not." Harold Whitman started to stand, but Richard raised one hand. The gesture was small, but it stopped him cold. "If opposing counsel wishes to challenge my standing, Richard said smoothly. I welcome it. I have fully disclosed my relationship. I have no financial interest in this case, and I am here solely to protect my client, Mr. Thomas Harris, from elder financial abuse perpetrated by my son. The courtroom fell silent once more. Elder financial abuse. The words hung in the air like an accusation carved in stone. Richard turned toward our table and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick folder and let it drop onto the defense table with a heavy thud. Let's start with the basics, he said quietly. He didn't need to raise his voice. 3 months ago, Daniel Reeves used a forged power of attorney to freeze Mr. Harris's bank accounts. All of them. $14.5 million locked away. Mr. Harris couldn't access his own money. He couldn't pay his bills. He couldn't hire an attorney. He lifted another document. This is the so-called power of attorney. It bears Mr. Harris's name, but not his signature. It is a forgery. An impressive one, I'll admit, but a forgery nonetheless. It has been analyzed by 3 independent handwriting experts, and all 3 confirmed it is fraudulent. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Whitman, but Whitman wouldn't meet his eyes. Your Honor, Richard said, turning back to the bench, Mr. Reeves obtained this document through coercion. He threatened Mr. Harris, telling him that if he didn't sign, he would never see his daughter again. My throat tightened. It was true, every word of it. Emily's head snapped toward Daniel. Just for a moment, I saw doubt flicker across her face. Richard wasn't finished. And where did that $14.5 million go? He removed another document. $8 million was transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account controlled by Daniel Reeves. The remaining funds were frozen under the guise of estate management. He let the silence stretch. Why would Daniel Reeves need $8 million so urgently? Richard turned and looked directly at his son. Because he owes a significant sum to a man named Victor Romano, gambling debts, and he needed to pay them quickly. Daniel's face flushed crimson. That's a lie. Is it? Richard's voice was ice. We'll see. Judge Brooks leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, do you have evidence to support these claims? I do, Your Honor, Richard replied. Bank records, forensic accounting reports, and witness testimony. And I would like to call my first witness. He paused. Daniel Reeves. The courtroom erupted again. Daniel Reeves walked toward the witness stand like a man heading for the gallows. I watched every step. Slow, heavy, deliberate. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. He glanced once toward Emily, searching for something, support, reassurance, anything. She didn't look back. The bailiff swore him in. Daniel sat, his hand trembling as he adjusted the microphone. Richard stood at the defense table, calmly buttoned his suit jacket, then moved forward, not rushed, not slow, just steady. Mr. Reeves, Richard began, his voice calm, almost gentle. When did you first meet Thomas Harris? Daniel cleared his throat. 4 years ago, at a gallery opening, Emily introduced us. Richard nodded once. And when did you begin planning to steal his money? The question landed like a hammer. Objection, Daniel blurted, then froze, realizing there was no lawyer left to speak for him. Judge Brooks leaned forward. Mr. Reeves, you are not permitted to object on your own behalf. Answer the question. Daniel's face flushed. I didn't steal anything. Thomas is elderly. He wasn't managing his finances properly. I was helping. Helping? Richard repeated softly, the word dripping with contempt. Is that why you deleted his text messages from Emily's phone? Daniel froze. Richard walked back to his briefcase and pulled out a thin tablet. He tapped the screen and held it up. These messages were recovered from cloud backups. Let me read one sent 2 years ago. He paused. Sweetheart, why won't you answer my calls? I miss you. Please call me back. Love, Dad. My chest tightened. I remembered typing that message late at night, alone in my kitchen, hoping, praying. Emily made a small, broken sound. I turned and saw tears streaming down her face. Emily never received that message, Richard said quietly, or the dozen others like it, because you, Daniel Reeves, installed spyware on her phone. You intercepted every call, every message. You isolated her from her father. That's not, Daniel started. Why? Richard cut in, his voice rising. So she wouldn't know what you were doing, so she wouldn't question you when you forged her father's signature. So she'd believe your lies about him being senile and controlling. Daniel leapt to his feet. She chose me because... He jabbed a finger in my direction. He's a bitter, controlling old man who never let her breathe. The gavel came down hard. Mr. Reeves, Judge Brooks snapped, control yourself. But Daniel wasn't listening. His face burned red, fists clenched. I gave her a life. I gave her freedom. And what did he give her? Guilt and manipulation. Sit down, Richard said coldly. Daniel collapsed back into the chair, chest heaving. Richard turned slightly. Let's talk about Victor Romano. Daniel went pale. Why do you owe Mr. Romano $2.3 million? Silence. And why is that debt due by this Friday? More silence. Sweat beaded on Daniel's forehead. Answer the question, Mr. Reeves, Judge Brooks ordered. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. Richard turned to the bench. Your Honor, I believe we've established sufficient evidence of fraud, coercion, and elder financial abuse. Harold Whitman suddenly stood, his face gray. I must withdraw as counsel for Mr. Reeves. A conflict of professional ethics has arisen. Judge Brooks studied him, then nodded. Granted, you may leave, Mr. Whitman. He gathered his briefcase, didn't look at Daniel, didn't say a word, just walked out. Daniel stared at the empty chair where his attorney had been, then at his father, whose eyes held only cold disgust, then at Emily, her face streaked with tears and doubt. He was utterly alone. The courtroom was still buzzing when Richard stood again. Daniel remained on the witness stand, shaking, trapped. Your Honor, Richard said evenly, I have one more witness, someone who can speak directly to Mr. Reeves's financial motivations. Judge Brooks nodded. Call your witness. Richard turned toward the back of the room. I call Mr. Victor Romano. The doors opened, and the man who entered wasn't a lawyer. He was a nightmare. 6'4", maybe 50, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my car. A heavy gold ring sat on his right hand, and behind him were two men with thick necks and dead eyes, moving like shadows. Daniel's face drained. No, he whispered. Not him. Victor Romano walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately, every step echoing. He reached the stand. The bailiff swore him in. Victor sat like a man who owned the room. Richard approached. Mr. Romano, please state your relationship with Daniel Reeves. Victor's voice was smooth, polite, and heavy. Daniel Reeves owes my organization $2.3 million. Gambling debts, signed contract, 15% monthly interest, compounded. The courtroom went silent. Richard held up a document. Is this the loan agreement? Victor glanced at it. Yes. And when did Mr. Reeves promise to repay you? This Friday. Richard nodded. Did he tell you how he planned to get the money? Victor leaned back slightly. He did. Thursday night he said his father-in-law was signing everything over. $14 million. His words were, the old man's signing tomorrow. I'll have your money by Friday. Daniel made a strangled sound. Did you believe him? Richard asked. Victor smiled, not warmly. At the time, yes. Now? He looked at Daniel. Looks like he lied to both of us. Judge Brooks leaned forward. Mr. Romano, are you filing a claim as a creditor? Yes, Your Honor. If assets are seized, I intend to be first in line. She nodded. Noted. Richard shook his head. No further questions. Victor stood, paused beside Daniel, looked down at him. I'll see you around, he said softly, then walked out with his shadows. The door closed, and the silence that followed was crushing. Judge Brooks cleared her throat. Mr. Bennett, any further witnesses? Richard nodded. I do, Your Honor. I call Angela Parker to the stand. Daniel's head snapped up, real fear flashing across his face for the first time. Angela Parker entered the courtroom carrying a secret that would destroy him. 32, sharp-featured, wearing a black blazer and dark jeans, a phone clenched in her hand. Daniel whispered, No, not her. Emily turned toward him. Who is that? He didn't answer. Richard stood. Ms. Parker, please state your relationship with Daniel Reeves. Angela stopped at the stand and looked straight at Daniel. I was his girlfriend, for 3 years, Until 6 months ago. The room erupted. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, then filled. "She's lying," Daniel shouted. "She's jealous." "Sit down," Judge Brooks thundered. Richard stepped closer. "Ms. Parker, could you elaborate?" Angela faced the room. "Daniel told me he only married Emily for her father's money. He said once Thomas Harris was out of the picture, he'd divorce her and we'd run away together." She paused. "Later, I learned he'd said the same thing to other women." Emily broke down. I wanted to reach her, but I couldn't move. "Do you have evidence?" Richard asked. Angela raised her phone. "I have a recording from 6 months ago." Richard looked to the bench. Judge Brooks nodded. "Proceed." Angela tapped the screen. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom. "Just keep Emily thinking her dad is the villain. Once he signs over the house, I'll get rid of him. Nursing home, far away, or something else. Either way, he wouldn't be a problem anymore." The silence that followed was absolute. I couldn't breathe. Get rid of him. Maybe something else. He had planned it. Planned to take everything from me and then lock me away. Or worse. I looked at him, my son-in-law, the man who had shaken my hand, smiled at my daughter, sat at my table. He had wanted me gone. Emily stood up. Her entire body was shaking. "You?" Her voice cracked. "You were going to hurt my father?" Daniel turned toward her, hands raised. "No, baby, I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking. I would never—" "You said you'd get rid of him," Emily screamed. Tears streamed down her face, her hands clenched into fists. "You made me think he was the problem. You deleted his messages. You told me he was controlling and manipulative." Her voice broke into a sob. "And the whole time, it was you." Daniel tried to stand. "Emily, please, just listen." "Mr. Reeves, sit down," Judge Brooks said coldly. He didn't. "Emily, wait." Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw it. The exact moment the illusion shattered. The moment she finally saw who he truly was. She turned and ran out of the courtroom, sobbing. "Emily, wait!" Daniel lunged forward. "Sit down!" Judge Brooks slammed the gavel. Daniel froze, then slowly collapsed back into the chair. Officer Davis moved toward the door, speaking into his radio. "We need someone to check on the defendant's daughter. She just exited the courtroom." I sat there, numb. My daughter was gone, broken. And Daniel, the man who had stolen from me, lied to me, isolated my child, threatened my life, sat alone on the witness stand as his world collapsed. His father stood 10 feet away and didn't even look at him. Richard simply closed his briefcase, calm and cold, as if his son were already dead to him. If you're still here after that bombshell, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment with your reaction. Were you as shocked as Emily? This story includes dramatized elements, but the message about family manipulation and elder abuse is very real. If you're invested in seeing justice served, stay with me. What happens next proves that karma never forgets. It was 11:45 in the morning. Judge Brooks had called a 15-minute recess after Emily ran out. I hadn't moved, couldn't. When court resumed, the room was full again. Emily had returned, but she wasn't sitting near Daniel. She sat alone in the back row, eyes red and swollen. Daniel remained on the stand, hollow, defeated. Then Richard Bennett stood. For the first time all day, he looked directly at his son. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "may I address the defendant directly?" Judge Brooks hesitated, then nodded. "You may." Richard buttoned his jacket and walked forward, slow and deliberate, stopping directly in front of Daniel. Father and son, face to face. "Daniel," Richard said evenly, "I raised you better than this. Your mother, God rest her soul, would be ashamed." Daniel's lip trembled. "Dad, please, I made mistakes, but I'm still your son." "I raised you," Richard interrupted, his voice shaking just slightly, "to work hard, to earn what you have, to build something honest, but you always chose shortcuts, always the easy way." He paused. "I bailed you out twice in your 20s, paid your gambling debts, gave you second chances. I thought you'd learned." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong." Daniel's face collapsed. "Dad!" Richard raised a hand. 2 nights ago, Thomas Harris called me. He was crying. He told me his son-in-law was stealing from him, isolating his daughter, freezing his accounts. He didn't know it was you. He just said your name." Richard's voice dropped. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard it, but I couldn't. He looked at Daniel. I became a lawyer to protect people like Thomas. Good people, vulnerable people. If I protect you now, if I stand by you while you destroy an innocent man, I betray everything I believe in. Daniel's voice cracked. So you're choosing him over me? Richard didn't blink. I'm choosing justice over blood. The room was silent. Daniel gripped the armrests. I needed money, Dad. I was in too deep. You could have asked me for help, Richard said coldly. You could have told me the truth. Instead, you chose to destroy a family. You chose to manipulate your wife. You chose to threaten an old man's life. He stepped back. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Richard turned and walked back to the defense table sitting beside me. My throat tightened. This man, who had walked into my nightmare just hours earlier, had sacrificed his own son for justice. I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded once. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Judge Brooks lifted her gavel. We will now proceed to the verdict. It was 12:30 in the afternoon. In her 25 years on the bench, Judge Brooks had seen countless cases, but this one would stay with her. She looked down at the papers, then up again. Her eyes were hard. Elder financial abuse combined with fraud, coercion, and threats of violence is particularly egregious. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Reeves, you are a disgrace. She continued. The court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Thomas Harris, on all counts. 1. All assets held by Daniel Reeves are frozen effective immediately. 2. The property on Oak Park Avenue is returned to Mr. Harris free and clear. 3. All funds totaling $14.5 million are to be restored within 48 hours. 4. This case is referred to the state's attorney for criminal prosecution, including fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. 5. A no-contact order is issued. Mr. Reeves is to have no contact with Mr. Harris or Ms. Emily Harris Reeves. Officer Davis, she said, take Mr. Reeves into custody. The cuffs clicked shut. As he was led away, Daniel turned. Dad? Richard didn't look back. The door closed, and I finally breathed. Soft footsteps approached. Emily walked toward me, tears streaking her face. She dropped to her knees in front of me. Dad, I'm so sorry. I knelt, despite the pain, and wrapped her in my arms. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered. You're home now. We walked out of the courthouse together. Sunlight spilled over us, warm, clean, hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. 3 months later, the story reached its final chapter. Justice doesn't always happen in a courtroom. Sometimes it happens in a cell. I was in my living room at 428 Oak Park Avenue, watching snow drift lazily outside the window. Fat, soft flakes floated down like pieces of peace. The fire crackled in the hearth, and on the mantel, a photo of my late wife smiled at me. She had always loved the first snowfall. The doorbell rang. I rose slowly but steadily and opened it. Rebecca stood there, holding a tin of cookies. Her face looked brighter now, lighter. Hi, Dad, she said. I smiled. Come in, sweetheart. It's cold out there. We sat by the fire, sipping tea, talking about small things. Her new apartment, art classes, how the city looked under snow. Then, quietly, she said, I'm so sorry, Dad, for letting him turn me against you, for not realizing it sooner. I reached over and took her hand. You're here now. That's all that matters. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment we just sat together, father and daughter. An hour later, another knock at the door. Charles Manning appeared on my porch, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you could use the good stuff, he said with a grin. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once helped Rebecca with homework, where my wife and I had planned weekends. I'm proud of what we did, Charles said quietly. It was the right thing. I'm sorry you lost your son, I replied. Charles shook his head. I didn't lose him, Chris. He lost himself. We sat in silence. I gazed out at the falling snow. Family isn't just blood, I said. It's the people who stand beside you when your world falls apart. Charles raised his coffee cup. To family. We clinked cups, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, whole. Meanwhile, at Cook County Jail, cell block D, Daniel Reeves sat on a narrow bunk, knees pulled to his chest. His orange jumpsuit hung loose. His beard was patchy, his eyes hollow. The door clanked open. Tony Romano stepped inside, also wearing orange. "No, please," Daniel whispered. Tony smiled, not kindly. "Funny running into you here, Reeves," he said, gesturing around the tiny cell. "Looks like we're cellmates." Daniel's face went white. Tony sat on the opposite bunk. "I know you don't have my money yet," he said, "but we've got 5 years to work that out. Interest compounds daily in here. You and I, Reeves, we're going to get very close." Daniel curled tighter into the corner. Officer Davis appeared in the doorway, glanced at both men, and shut the cell door. The lock clicked. Daniel thought he could steal from a helpless old man. He thought family loyalty would protect him. He was wrong. Justice found him, not just through the law, but through the very people he had betrayed. Back at 428 Oak Park Avenue, I stood by the window. Rebecca came beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. Outside, the snow fell soft, quiet, and clean. For the first time in years, everything felt right. Looking back, I never imagined the deepest betrayal in my life would come from within my own family. But when I had nothing left, no voice, no allies, God gave me the strength to stand. Don't make the mistakes I made. Don't stay silent. Don't trust blindly. Speak up. Ask for help. God never abandons the vulnerable. He sends the right people, like Charles, exactly when they are needed. What these grandpa stories teach is clear. Family isn't defined by blood alone. Strangers can become your strongest protectors. Stories like mine aren't just entertainment, they are warnings. Financial abuse is real. Emotional manipulation is real. Karma is real, and it always arrives at the right moment. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your own grandpa stories in the comments. This content includes dramatized elements for educational and storytelling purposes. Some details have been fictionalized, but the lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are absolutely real. If this content isn't for you, that's okay. Explore what suits your preferences best.